So in the interest of you guys seeing who you're talking to, I'm taking a recording and a video. Excuse the fact that I'm sitting in a car. The reality of South Africa is that we've got load shedding, and I've had to improvise just to deliver this video to you. So if there is a bit of background noise, unfortunately, I am sitting in a motor vehicle, and please excuse that. Right, so this is the person you're talking to. It's Matodonke Mpechwa, and I'll be assisting you guys with text. So I'm going to switch off my video. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we're going to go through the question that has been given to us and think about what are some of the text considerations we need to think about when looking at the paper. All right, so I'm switching off my video. Okay, so at this point in time, you would have been looking at the other task. G, mine I think is a bit of a simple one in that I need to look at task F. So on that basis, let's jump into the scenario. So I'm just going to start off with a bit of the background information. Now it's quite important that we look at the background information because it does inform everything that is happening in the assessment. So that's why it's important that we first look at that information, see what is important from a text perspective. We then highlight that, and then from there onwards, we'll then move on to task F. Right. Remember here, we don't, at this point in time, we don't know what we are going to be asked. And really it's for us to have reflections on the information that we have in place and see how that information we can utilize it. You can utilize it to assist us with doing research so that when we then get the information on the day, that info on the day, it will then assist us in ensuring that we are able to utilize our research effectively. Right, so I'm going to start reading. So hi there, welcome on your first day at Limpros Group. We just call it Limpros internally. We are very excited to have you join the finance team. You will be reporting to me and will act as my right hand within the finance team. I will ask you to compile budgets, assist in the preparation of annual financial statements, advise on strategic initiatives, and consider funding options. So I'm going to stop there. So finance environment, the requirements of you to the Income Tax Act. Right. So let's then continue just to understand the nature of the business, because in understanding the nature of the business, it then does drive us getting to the correct tax implications. So Limpros was founded in 1985 and is today a significant player in the private school market in South Africa. Okay, so they're running private schools in South Africa. So the source of their income would be South Africa for tax purposes. The group also has various tertiary education brands. Today, we have 25 schools operating across South Africa and more than 8,200 enrolled learners. The school includes a pre-primary, primary, and high schools. These schools are branded as either Limpros or Meta. The tertiary division has 11 different campuses delivering various post-high school certificate and diploma programs in fields such as digital marketing, brand management, project management, hospitality, and service management, public sector management, and data science. Many What is the amount that we have to consider as part of gross income? So here we've got learners that are part of an academic institution, and therefore whatever income that is generated by the academic institution will then form part of the gross income of an institution. Over and above that, what we also need to think of is the expenditure that is then incurred by that institution. What expense will be allowed as a deduction and what expense will not be allowed as a deduction. Now, the key thing for us is what income constitutes gross income, and that is what we will then be able to claim as a deduction all the expenditure that relates to that gross income from a tax perspective. Right, then we then continue reading. 2020 was a tough year for most, and we were not spared the consequences of COVID-19 lockdowns. Okay, so for me, I stop there. COVID-19 lockdowns, from a tax perspective, are there any provisions that were enacted in South Africa in order to provide relief from COVID-19? So again, when you're doing your research and you're reflecting, that's what you need to go out there and look at and say, what are these things that I need to go out and research about COVID-19 in terms of relief that was advanced to companies in South Africa? Right, it was difficult to navigate through the stop-start of school and campus closures and reopenings. Fortunately, we were able to move rapidly to online learning, although this is not a strength of Limpros yet. Certain operations, such as our pre-primary schools, were not able to operate online during lockdowns. Things improved in 2021 as we all learned how to live with lockdowns. So I'm going to stop there. Now, from a tax perspective, in order for an expense to be allowed as a deduction, remember that you need to be considering that it is incurred for purposes of trade and it is incurred in the production of income. Now, from that perspective, they're saying we had lockdown. You know, at some point we couldn't operate. For the pre-primary, we couldn't move them to the online platform. So now, what does that mean? Now, this is the research that they need to be going and doing and saying, what still constitutes trade? You know, for the purposes of what Limpros is doing, do they continue carrying on a trade? Okay, because remember, they will still have expenses that they will incur during that. Okay, did they incur expenses, and were those expenses incurred as part of trade? So that's what you need to think about. And over and above that, were the expenses incurred in the production of income. So you need to be looking at the case law relating to that and ensure that that case law is in place so that you are able to argue the point. If, let's say, SARS comes to you and says, no, we're not going to give you this expense as a deduction, you are then able to argue that point and say, no, but yes, we might have not had learners on campus, but there were still expenses that we incurred in the production of income and be able to prove what that income was. Okay, so these are things we need to be thinking about and researching in the interim. If we then continue, so it then says, I have attached some PowerPoint slides that outline our vision and strategy, as well as some operational and financial information. We use these slides for orientation purposes for new staff members and non-executive directors. These are also useful for planning purposes and biannual strategy sessions. Enjoy the read. That's kind regards, Susan, the CFO. Right now, we're going to jump straight into task F. Now that we've looked at the background information, and from the background information, we've then said, okay, fine, what could potentially be relevant for us when it comes to tax? Okay, so what could be relevant for us when it comes to tax? Okay, so now we go to task F and let's see what happens then in document 7. Yeah, so I'm just jumping through. So remember, at this point, we don't have the information. So we are looking and saying, how do we go about doing our research and reflecting on the information that we have in order for us to be able to utilize the information that we have to assist us to get to the conclusion that we want to reach. Right, so we then get to document 7. So this is then the email from the CFO, and the email then is relating to tax matters. So I'm going to start reading and then we're then going to reflect. Hi there, it's me again. As you might have heard, our tax manager Suresh Naidu recently resigned and we are still in the process of appointing someone to this position. In the interim, I would really appreciate it if you could assist me with some urgent tax technical and tax administration matters. I'm sure your knowledge from your university days will be sufficient to assist me with this matter. I don't want Limpros to miss any deadlines and incur any additional costs. So I'm going to stop there. Now, they're then saying to us, we need to assist with tax technical matters and tax administration matters. So on the technical matters, of course, you would have to look at the specific acts that are relevant to the information that we have. So as we're looking at some of the info that is given to us, we then say, which of the tax acts are relevant to this information? Over and above that, the one thing that's key in that paragraph is that they also say we need to advise on tax administration matters. So for me, I then think, okay, fine, what could potentially be the issues that I need to think about from the Tax Administration Act and see how I can then assist the company. Now, the other thing which is key is that you then see that the CFO then says they don't want to miss any deadlines and they don't want to incur any additional costs. So from my perspective, I already think of that and say, okay, from an administrative perspective, what are some of the deadlines that a company has when it comes, for example, to income tax, when it comes to VAT, and when it comes to things like provisional tax, when it comes to things like employees tax? So those are the things that you need to be thinking about and reflecting and researching and ensure that you've got them on hand. Because as you can see from the pre-release information, you'll possibly, you would have to look at ensuring that the company does not miss any deadlines, it does not incur any additional penalties or any interest, because then their person who was looking after tax, who is Suresh, is no longer part of the business. And so then maybe Suresh left before finalizing things, and therefore there might be penalties or interest that will accrue going forward. So those are things that you need to prevent. If we then continue reading, the imposition of COVID-19 lockdowns has impacted on the ability of some of the parents and students to settle tuition fees. As you saw in the extract of the annual financial statements in the PowerPoint slides, our bad debts increased significantly in FY 2021, and our allowance for credit losses in accordance with IFRS 9 is understandably higher than previous years. So then I then stop there. Now, there are two things that I'm picking up from that. One, they are saying that our bad debts have increased significantly. Now, we then need to think, what are the tax implications for bad debts? Okay, so what are the income tax implications for bad debts in the current year? And over and above that, they then say our allowance for credit losses has increased in terms of IFRS. Yeah, of course, then that again has got separate tax implications that we need to think about. So as part of our research, we then need to think and say, okay, fine, we've got bad debts. What are the implications of bad debts on our books? So now we then need to go out there and say, okay, we've got bad debts with it, which is an expense. And from a tax perspective, what is then allowed to be deducted as a bad debt? That's what we would reflect on. That's what we need to go and reflect on. That's what we need to go and research so that we become comfortable in terms of what does an increase in bad debts mean from a tax perspective, and of course from an accounting perspective, because we're also looking at preparation of financial statements. Okay, what is it that we need to have on hand in order for us to satisfy it could be the VAT implications from bad debts perspective. Okay, and then in terms of the allowances for credit losses, we also need to reflect on that, okay, fine, in terms of IFRS 9, we've got an allowance for credit losses. Now reflect what are the implications from a text perspective? Okay. Return. Because what you might find is that a question might say to you, okay, fine, now disclose of, of in the in the ITR 14, where do you disclose this? Where do you disclose your bad debts? Uh, 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 your bad debts written off. Where